All right, I wanted to cover a couple more topics here with LabVIEW. And last week we talked about arrays, which were a way to store bunches of the same data type. And this week we're going to talk about clusters, which is a way to store bunches of things of different data types. And so this is really good for saving sets of data or maintaining some sort of database. So like suppose you wanted to, in the past we did temperatures, and it was like, you know, if we had 10 temperatures we wanted to record every time the loop executed, we'd use an array. But suppose I wanted to record 2 temperatures, 2 pressures, there were maybe a couple true or false signals from whether or not heaters were on. And so the big thing is with different data types, it's better to use a cluster. And I'll go through a couple things. So the first thing you're going to do for your lab here, there's another real advantage to clusters, is they are a way to graph data pretty quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in a while loop. I'm going to put in my stop button. I'm going to put in my stop button. I said I'm going to put in my stop button. Oh, I don't know what happened to my window now. That's cute. Alright. Let's try that again. I'm going to put in my while loop. Create a control. There's my stop button. And over here, I'm going to put in 2 knobs. One. I'll drag it into the loop. And 2. Now if I wanted to graph both of these, I'll go ahead and put in timing structure too. This will help. Let's put in a wait until next and make this 250. Okay. And I'll go ahead and put in a graph over here. Now if I wanted to graph both of these knobs on the same graph, which is often really nice for like comparing things. You'll notice in the heat exchanger we have the hot and cold, both hot and cold streams, both the input and the output. So basically 4 graphs on the same, 4 traces on the same graph, I should say, on the same chart. It's a really nice way to compare things because you can just look and see where the lines are relative to each other. So if I want to do that, I end up having to use a cluster. So if I right click, and if I go up here to cluster, you'll see there's one called bundle. And just like you would do with wires, you bundle clusters together. So I basically run those there. Now if I had more, you know, suppose I had 10 knobs, I could just, you know, expand that down. But for now we just have the 2. If I run this over to the cluster, or over to the chart, you'll see the color changes because now we're dealing with a cluster. But nothing much happens over here on the graph. Well, if we right click on the graph, go to properties, if you haven't played with this, there's all sorts of things you can change on the graph anyway, so it's worth looking at properties. And then 6 to 8 months when it loads. Okay. Okay, so first thing under appearance, if you look here, it says plots shown. Well, I want 2 because I've got 2 inputs. And I could do things like shows me all sorts of things here. I can sometimes I have to hit OK. You'll see that the legend has changed now. Now I have a red and a white plot. I can move the little legend around. If I go back into it, back into properties, you can see that I can change some of these things. I can be like, okay, let's look at plot 1 and it's red. Maybe I want that to be green. I can change that. I can make this a log scale if I want. I can invert it. I can do all sorts of things to this graph if I want. But I think that'll be good for now. I got 1 white trace and 1 green trace. And if I run this, Right now it's kind of boring because they're both at 0. I turn up 2, turn up 1, and you can see both of them are showing up on the graph. So that's a really important use of clusters. I'm going to do one more thing here. What I started to talk about at the beginning here was, suppose I had number, push button, and maybe a string control, and I need to do a bunch of things to them. I can probably even throw in well, I'll just leave it there for now. And I need to do a bunch of things to them. You can imagine having all these wires running through here. You know, these three is 3 wires. Anytime I need to do anything to them, I would have to manipulate those. So that's a bit of a nuisance. So instead of having all those wires, I can do what's called, building a cluster. So if I right click over here, I can say cluster. I can bundle them. And even though, oops, I need to make it bigger. Even though they're different data types, in the end I have one wire coming out. And in fact, what does that look like? Well, let's add an indicator. So it puts them all together like that. And then I just have one wire to deal with. Now suppose I wanted to just change, suppose I wanted to separate all of them. Well, what I could do is I could go cluster, unbundle. And then I could put indicators or do whatever I wanted to. So basically it's just a way to group bunches of different data together of different data types. And that's nice and all. And I can put anything in here. I can put arrays. I can put user-defined types like those enums that we dealt with. I can do all sorts of stuff with it. But suppose I just wanted to, let's say I want to just invert this true signal. This button signal. What I can do is, rather than unbundling the entire thing and bundling it back up to go to this output cluster, I can say, you know what? I'll need that one. I meant to hit the other one. Unbundle by name. And let me rename these. Pressure, bang switch, comments. Okay. So maybe I just want to look at the one. I can unbundle it by that name. And like I said, I was going to invert it, right? So I'll just put a not in here. I can do anything to it. That's just what I was. Oops. I want to get rid of this wire. This wire again. Okay. Did I do that right? Element. Oh, yeah. I'll show you what's happening here in a second. Okay. So what I've done here is I've said unbundle just the switch, just unbundle bang switch, invert that signal, and then rebundle it back into the same package. And I have to tell it where I'm putting it, so that's what this wire is about. And if you do Control H at any point, you can see what things are supposed to be in each of these. So unbundle by name, you're putting in the cluster, and it's you're selecting the name, and then that element is coming out. So that's exactly what I've done here. And then for bundle by name, I've given it an element, and then given it the cluster, the input cluster, meaning where this thing's getting stored back into, and then our output clusters with whatever changes we made. And we can make these bigger. If I want to unbundle and look at 2 things, I can do that by name. Like I can expand that, but I think you get the idea. Now when I run this, you'll see that the oops, it's not in a loop. Hold on. That's why it only ran once, right? Okay. Now you'll see when I run this, the button does the exact opposite of what I wanted, it shows here. So anyway, so that's clusters. That's how to use them in graphs. That's how to bundle, unbundle. It's a really convenient way, and especially when you name your labels here, it's a really convenient way to document as well. I also point out, if I wanted to document this, I can just double click in here and write, this is documentation. And that's just a comment that'll show up. It doesn't do anything in the code, but it can help people understand what you've written. So hope you learned something from it, and hope you enjoyed it. There it is.